Hello, practice owners. If you want to build, create, and replicate practices that run without you, even when you're away, then this is the episode for you. Hello, and welcome to today's episode. It's a big topic. Now, what I hear from a lot of practice owners that I speak to, including our clients, is there's this big onus and a big need for the practice owners typically to do tasks within the practice that takes them away from doing the real tasks that take that practice to the next level. All right. So today in this episode, we're going to break all that down and create a framework of thought, of application, and of doing to make sure that we can minimize the number of things that we do as a practice owner, right? So we create really the life that we really want, to empower and help the team grow and to take your practice to the next level, right? Now, this is a very powerful topic, like I mentioned. A lot of the principles here are from a book called the E-Myth, all right? The E-Myth, or the Entrepreneur's Myth, by an author called Michael G. Gerber, all right? This is a book that I recommend to all our clients when they first sign up with us, only because just in case, it doesn't matter if you're starting out in your practice or you have lots of practices, I find that there's still tasks that everyone does to a certain level that actually keep them away from their actual goals, right? So it's a great book. I recommend you go and read it. Now, like I mentioned, this applies if you're just literally starting out a practice, or whether you're a multinational and you have lots of practices, right? It works always. Because what I find is when you're revisiting these things, once again, you'll get to know some of the things that might need a bit of tweaking from your end. Okay, so this episode is all about distilling down and finding out exactly what you might need to stop doing and what you need to focus on to really take your practice to the next level. All right, so now I'm going to start off by covering the stages of practice ownership. All right, so typically, when somebody opens up a practice, typically they're, maybe back of the garage or back of the house in the garage or something like that. They tend to be the therapist. All right? They're the therapist. They do everything. So they do the treating, they do the admin, they do the marketing, they do the laundry, they do the follow-ups, everything. But there will come a point when you realize that if you want to go to the next level, there is no way you can do all of that and still grow, because it takes time. Plus, it's taking you out of your expertise and the things that you really, really love to do that makes you happy and obviously grow. All right, the next level is the manager. This is where you're delegating some of the tasks, but you're still heavily involved in the operations side. Now, what I mean is so there's a couple of people, maybe one or two people in your practice, but you're still managing some of the operations, maybe doing some of the marketing, maybe lots of things. You're still being a manager of people and systems. You are the system, in other words, right? So the third one, where we all want to get to, is the true practice owner. Now it's a visionary role, right? This person is extremely polished and good at recognizing what are the small things that they need to spend their time on, most of their time on, to have the biggest impact, right? In other words, they look for points of leverage because they're really focused on long-term and growth of the practice. The first two stages, therapist and manager, they think very short-term. They literally think right now, I need to take care of this, I need to solve this, I need to put out this fire, all that kind of thing. They're stuck in the very short-term. But that will run out of fuel eventually, right? Because there's a lot of effort that comes from you. You can never get out of it. You can't go on holidays, because if you do, the chances are the practice is not going to be in the same state and the place you left when you get back into it, right? So you really need to get into a long-term way. And that the only way to do that is being very clear on what are the small things you need to do. Okay. So if you're already doing this, fantastic, but keep listening, because like I mentioned, the more you revisit this, what I find is it might remind you a couple of things to keep doing to really polish things up and go to the next level. It's a very, very big topic. So why does this topic matter? We already talked about it, right? In other words, if you're the manager or if you're the therapist, the business really, really hardcore depends on you. And it's not a business, it's a job, all right? Because like I said, if you go away, the chances are when you come back, it'll be in a different state. You would have lost revenue, people have lost their way, all that kind of thing. There are problems. It's a job. You need to get to the place where you're, like I said, you are the practice owner, the true practice owner. Now, there's a few delegation rules that I like to mention. I even practice this, right? The reason being, these delegation rules will give you an idea as to how to break down all the things that you're spending your time on when it comes to the practice, all right? And here they are. Now, there's a Pareto principle. It's called the 80-20 rule. It says 20% of your efforts will give 80% of your results. In other words, 20% of all the tasks that you are doing will give you 80% of the results. Okay? So in other words, 80% of the tasks you're doing are only giving 20% of the results. So the question is, why would you do that other 80% that only gives you 20% of the result? You want to be focusing on the 20% of the tasks that you need to do that create the 80% of the results. Now you can go 80-20 on the 80-20, and that comes down to 64-4. Now that means there are 4% of the tasks that generate 64% of the result. Now this result could be, the number of new patients, the number of staff, the amount of revenue, the PVA, whatever. Just pick a metric. You can apply this rule to any area in your practice. So remember 80-20? 80-20 on 80-20 is 64-4. Right? So 4% of tasks will generate 64% of the result. You can go 80-20 on that again. And that creates 51.2% of the results distills down to 0.8% of the tasks. Think about it. Less than 1% of the tasks you're doing is going to give you more than half the result. What a powerful way to think about things. So if you're doing this, fantastic, right? There's a way that you can keep making sure that you're auditing yourself to make sure that you're on top of the tasks you're doing and you're delegating the rest. You're really trying to get to that 51.2% of the result. You want to focus on that 0.8% of the tasks that give more than half the result. You want to focus on that, right? For me, part of that 0.8% of the tasks, right, is creating content like this. Because our role is to make a heavy impact on the physio industry around the world. And my job is to spread that message. And one of the ways I can do that is by doing this podcast. So I spend a lot of time doing this podcast and creating content. That's part of my 0.8. I spend a lot of time in doing the content creation and the marketing and the sales, because that generates 51 or half the result. All right. So I use this as a rule to find out. I do a audit every single month. I look at all the tasks I'm doing and I find out which ones do not belong in the 0.8% of that rule. Whatever metric, everything else you want to delegate out. And it's very important that you shift your mindset to becoming a true practice owner, because otherwise you cannot grow. It's very difficult, or it's almost impossible. All right. Well, it is impossible because you have a certain amount of time. You just need to create leverage in how you use that time to get to that next level. All right. So most practices stay stuck because either they don't know what they are doing, mainly the practice owners, they don't know what they're doing that is chewing up a lot of time that don't give the results. All right. Or they're having trouble letting go of those tasks because they might be worried about other people doing it the same quality and that kind of thing. And what I say to that is 80% done by somebody else is 100% awesome. So if you're doing a 100% job and you think that you are the only one who can do that job to that level, it is very unrealistic for you to expect one of your staff, especially staff that doesn't have any shareholding of your practice or your business, they have no ownership. It's very difficult for you to expect them to give the 100%. They have no buy-in like you. So 80% done by them is 100% awesome. It gives you more time to really focus on that 0.8% of things to move you really forward. Another reason why practices stay stuck is there's a lack of systems to make sure there's consistency. All right? What I do is when I realize all the tasks that I need to do, I create a playbook around them. For example, let's just say sending an email response or something like that. I will create a playbook on how to do that. I'll video record on my screen or a certain task I'll video record or have a camera in front of me guiding them through the whole process. That way I can go, you know what, this is how I do this task, you do it. All right? You need to look at employing tools like Loom, Loom, right? It's a screen recording software, or even your phone to do things, to record things so other people can watch and replicate what you're doing, right? So have the systems in play. There's lots of other types of systems, but that's a really effective one for the things that you are doing, right? And because of this, you truly misunderstand the true cost of staying hands-on. Now, like I mentioned, you need to be laser focused on that 0.8% of the tasks that you need to focus on. That's going to give you more than half the result, right? If you don't do that, you're just wasting time and money and resources. You're taking time away from yourself to really take your practice to that next level, all right? Because if you do that, you're going to have limited growth. You will feel overwhelmed because there's so many things to do. And maybe deep down inside, you might feel that, this is just a waste of time, but I have to do it. Or I don't know who else to give it to. Nobody else will do it. All the kind of things that we talked about before. You're going to feel overwhelmed because there's so many things. Distilling it down to a very few things that you need to do it will declutter your mind, time and space to do it really, really well and focus on it. And it'll be clarity and absolute power. If you don't do that, you're going to miss opportunities to really take your practice to that next level and to expand. Maybe get that next practice, or maybe hire a few more staff, all that kind of thing. At the end of the day, if you don't do that, you're going to have a practice where it's very difficult to function without you. So you can't really go away without coming to maybe a bit of a chaos or not ideal when you come back, right? That's a big thing. So what are some benefits of shifting to a practice owner, like a true practice owner? Like I mentioned, you don't get your time back. You declutter your mind. You make it very, very easy. You find out the things that really, really work, 1% of the things that really drive you forward, or 0.8% of the things that drive you really forward. And not only that, if you're doing 0.8% of the tasks, that means everybody else or something else, software, whatever, something else is doing it. That means you can leave the clinic with peace and reassurance that when you get back, it's not going to be that different. In fact, the chances are it would have grown without you because the systems are in place, all right? And because of that, because the system and the practice is running by itself, you're going to have a high level of profitability to run because you'll have better systems because of delegation, right? So what are the key mindset shifts that we need to have? It's to hire people, hire great people, and create great systems. All right. Create systems that can be run by great people. That's it. Right. So, and focus on the returns of your delegations. Remember? So when you give something away, you're freeing up your time. Don't focus too much on the expense, right? But focus on what you're getting back. What's the return? Right. So that's a big thing. Now, thinking long term. All right, like I mentioned, the first two stages, which is the therapist and the manager, they're very short-term thinkers. They're literally thinking now, next month, that's it. Long-term, the true practice owners, they think 2 years in advance, all right, at least a year in advance. They cook a quarter, 2-3 years in advance. And to do that, you really need to have these systems that scale as your practice grows, all right? So here are some ways to systemize your practice for growth. Number one, when it comes to clinical systems, having a playbook for consistent treatment protocols. Now, when you look at it, university, that when we got a degree or where our staff learn from, it's a great protocol because it's research back mostly, right? It's research back in how to treat a certain condition. Those are great protocols to have. You should really look at integrating those ways of doing things and treating into your system. All right. You need to create a manual of how to do things. Right. That way, even if somebody new comes in and don't really know about a certain condition, there's a literal playbook for it. Assess this, do that. This is the test for it. Or this is how you treat it. This is how you remeasure it. This is the kind of treatments that you need. This is what you can expect. This will standardize the patient care and the experience, which means you should be able to remove yourself even more if you're in the treating role. And if you don't want to do the treating role, you'll be able to do that effectively with other people, right? Because you're basically relying on evidence-based care that you are. Yeah, this is why I like to pull out the university example. They teach you what works. Make sure that's a part of your manual as well. Obviously not in a 4-year way or a 5-year way, like a university degree, but make it briefer so it's much more readable and user-friendly. Okay, admin systems. You've got to automate your appointment schedules, right? There's, the clinical, no-call, there's lots of systems to do that. Make sure that it's polished up, clear onboarding processes for staff, for patients, right? Have a playbook for all of these. Efficient billing and reporting as well. There's a playbook for all of them. Quality control, number 3, regular training for staff, right? Have a roster where people have to present on something. Maybe what I find useful is a challenging patient that they've had and how they, change the course of direction to get them better. Have a system for in-service for everything and have a system for managing their performance and their KPIs. It could be your PVA, could be a utilization rate. Those are typically the 2 biggest things. Have systems for that and profession development like we talked about as well. Okay, so delegation really is the key to freedom. Take the time to identify what you are doing. So sit down and look at all the tasks you're doing and figure out which of those give the biggest results, right? Knowing that 0.8% of the tasks will give you 51.2% of the results. You should be very, very clear about that, right? And train and empower staff to take ownership of key areas. So the other 48% of tasks, you want to give that away. Right? Actually, not 99.2% of tasks. You want to have a look at delegating. So if you do this rule, right, you can get down to 99.2% of tasks you're not doing. All right, you got to train and empower staff to take ownership of these key areas. Like I mentioned, use and create playbooks. Use tools like Loom. Record using your phone to make sure the consistency is there whenever they're doing the tasks. And often what I find is you need to have a long-term view on people, right? Because remember, unless you own the practice or you have some sort of ownership of the practice, it's not likely they're going to be fully vested in it. All right. And typically they don't tend to problem solve. They might come to you with problems. So for that, I have a framework, right? I recommend a framework. It's called the 1-3-1 framework. So if they come to you, typically they might come to you with a problem, right? So that's the one problem. What I always say is, all right, cool. So there's one problem. Give me the 3 possible solutions to that problem. All right. So that's the 3. And 1 is what is the one best solution and why. So 1-3-1, what's the problem? What are the 3 possible solutions? 3 possible solutions are really in play to make sure you're not just doing the first thing you think of. You're actually thinking of a few ways to do it. And what's the most powerful solution and why? The great break framework. Okay. And that's the same way you should be developing your leadership teams as well. All right. You should have leaders to take care of key departments in your practice. So admin is one of them, right? Operations is another. Clinical is another. Those are 3 main ones. All right. And you've got to focus on energy on mentoring the leaders. That's part of the 0.8% of tasks. All right. All right. That's one of the things. So build a culture of accountability and autonomy. Like I mentioned, autonomy is something where they have a framework and they're guided to solve problems. That's the 1-3-1 framework. All right. So what is a role of a visionary practice owner? Clearing out all the things you have to do will allow you to set clear goals for the growth of your practice, right? It'll give you the time to see what are the new opportunities for you as a practice owner and how you can expand and create strategies for long-term success. That's what you're really, really looking for, all right? So in other words, you're literally culling out everything except the things that truly, truly matter, that really drive your business and the practices forward. So, like I mentioned, take the time to audit once a month all the things you're doing. Look at the 8% of the things that drive the biggest growth, right? The rest of it, systemize it. Look how to systemize those things and delegate them, right? Hire people and have people for key areas, admin, clinical, operations, and review them regularly just to make sure that you're on top of the system. Doing that will allow you to have a practice that is self-sustainable. It'll run by itself because you're spending the time to create the systems and the people. Remember, hire great people, create great systems. They work with each other, which allows you to get what you truly came to get from owning a physio practice. All right. So you can focus on growing it, not running it. Remember the 1-3-1 rule. People are going to come to you with problems, and your first inkling is maybe to solve that problem. But that is a short-term way of thinking. That's not going to work because that means they're reliant on you. You want to develop leaders, and the way to do that is the 1-3-1. All right. So get to the point where, if there's a big enough problem that needs your input, obviously that's going to be okay. But anything else, tell them you need to come with a 1-3-1, and that works. Right. So I hope that was useful. If it was, there are lots of things, lots of articles, lots of videos, lots of things to download, all that kind of thing in our website. Head to our website, physiomarketing.co. That's .co, right? And thanks for tuning in, and I'll talk to you next time.